Hello. You're muted. You gotta unmute.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah, hi.
Hi, so where
Nice.
are you?
Oh no, I'm home. It's just this is my ideal place that I am.
Oh, because I'm in a
Eventually,
place like that.
I know you are. I know you are. So
Yeah,
I'm imagining it until I can really live it.
yeah,
But
yeah,
anyways, I'm so glad you're on early because I thought I just got in. So I thought I saw an email from you earlier about the 6th and the 25th.
yeah.
So I didn't know it, but the system, because when you very first registered and I guess you put your card in, you did it on the 6th. So when I set it up as a monthly payment thing, I didn't realize that I thought that you would have to go in again and again on the 25th. But apparently, the website just set it up itself and automatically charged you on the 6th. So I'm sorry about that. I had no
No, it's
idea.
okay.
Yeah.
Actually, leave it as an
Okay, yeah.
advanced
So I
thing.
was saying that then don't worry about the 25th. I mean, you can pay it as fast as you want, but since it already took it on the 6th, you don't have to pay again on the 25th. You see
Okay,
what
I
I'm saying?
probably will this
Yeah.
month
Yeah.
'cause,
However
I,
you
I
can.
can.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
That's how I am
so,
too. If I can, I do. And then the
yeah.
the good thing is you won't have to wait for your certificates and all that, your credits and everything. You get them as soon as you're done paying. So
Oh, yeah,
that's
yeah,
great.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. So, if you still have a few moments,
I do. No
I
one's here. Let's talk.
I, I'm hoping to do the NPCP
Mm-hmm.
around May. And, I haven't done it just because I've been doing Pilates for so many years.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
like when I started, there wasn't anything. But, so hopefully I'll have that and then your certification. But I mean, it's been wonderful. It's been
Yeah,
really
thank
great.
you. Well, and also, you need a certain number of hours, I think, to renew the certificate. I don't know if you need it initially, I don't remember. But
Yeah,
if you want to, this qualifies for all of it.
I'm
So,
sure.
yeah.
I'm, sh-
And then,
I'm sure. I mean, how can I say, I'm getting most out of this than maybe a module 4 or 5 of
oh,
very
good.
advanced movements, but we'll talk about it later. But thank
Yeah.
you.
Also, I wanted to tell you, Gabriella, one more thing. And hi, Jana. But let me finish my thought.
Hi.
If you want on Amazon, they have NPCP study materials. So you
I
can,
have all that.
oh,
I've
you
got
have
all
it.
that.
Oh,
Got all
okay.
that.
You're set. You're
I've
set.
I've I've got all that.
And
I've
you'll
got
do fine with all your
I'm
years of teaching.
I'm ready, and especially after this course, and but I'm more interested in certifying with you because
Oh, thank you.
I resonate so much with I feel very confident because I resonate so much with what you're teaching us.
Hmm.
It's kind of very much in the line of because I have senior clients now that
Yeah, yeah.
it
Oh, I'm
just really
so happy to
resonates.
hear it.
And maybe this is maybe a question for the end or interesting for everyone. I'm wondering, how much of this could apply to a little bit of dementia or somebody with a
So
stroke.
I will tell you right now, it
Yeah,
absolutely applies.
I
I have several clients who have severe dementia, and their families can't figure out how I can get them to do the movements they're doing. But there is definitely a way to work with Alzheimer's and dementia. I can tell you that from experience, and I will be writing a workshop on that later. And then in terms of stroke, I mean, I use a lot of the concepts that I am teaching right now for everybody, especially people who have had,
exactly.
some kind of
Exactly.
injury or
No,
illness.
just
Yeah.
just curiously, my mother has a little dementia, and
Oh, okay.
and my aunt had a stroke 3 days ago.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
I'm getting ready to work with them.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
got your work cut
Yeah.
out for you, but fortunately
Yeah.
you've got a great arsenal to,
Yes, thank you.
you know.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. So this is why I'm just doubly appreciative of what
Good.
we're doing.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And also, by the way, just remember that I'm always here. So if
Thank
you
you.
ever do have a question or you need to reach out, please, please don't hesitate.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Jana, how are you?
Good, I'm good.
Yeah.
Rushing around at the last minute, so
Well, I'm
can you hear
happy
me
you made
okay?
it in. Yes. Great.
Yeah. So
Okay.
you got my message about next week?
Yeah, yeah, no worries because I'm going to
Okay. I
record
think
it.
you already sent me the manual, didn't you?
Not for next week. So
I
what I
thought it
sent,
said 6.
yes, we are going to do 6 today. My
Oh,
message was
okay.
that we had started 5 last week, but I need to do 6 today. And then next week I'll pick up with 5 and we'll keep going. Or if we have time
Okay.
at the end of today, I'll backtrack to 5
Okay.
because 6, the truth is I have a really big presentation to do tomorrow on exactly this content. So I want to go through it and just make sure that it's all comprehensive. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
practice on it for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Get
Okay,
it
and
out.
then we're missing Tere and Paige. Paige mentioned she was going to be a little bit late, but we're going to go ahead and get started anyhow. So one thing I do want to let you know, Jana, you'll be familiar with this. Gabriella, it'll be new for you, but starting next week, you will need to pick 3 of the 11 absolute movements and teach them to us. Okay, so
I'm not
Janet,
gonna
you won't
I'm not
be
gonna
here.
be here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
worry.
Okay.
And plus, you've
Okay.
already done it, but you've already done it. But
But I'd love to see everybody teach just
yeah,
for
well, you'll get it on the
experience.
recording anyhow.
Right.
Okay, so Gabriella, you got that right.
Yes,
Next
the
week,
absolute.
yeah, you're going to teach 3, and you can, since you're here, you get to pick the first 3 that you want. So I'll write it down. You can also just email me, but it would be a good idea to pick them as soon as possible because since you're the first one here, you can just, have the choice. Okay.
Me?
You, if you
Yeah,
want,
I
if you
already
want.
did it. It's your turn.
Okay.
Jana's on a review, so she's gone through this process.
Spine flexion for sure, the first one.
Okay, well, those are the spinal movements. So that's mini set 1. You want to do mini set 1?
Yes. I'm still not very clear as to what's the difference between the whole sets or the mini sets, but
So the mini set 1 is going to include breathing, arm reaches, and spinal movements.
in any
Still,
position. Are we
What's that?
talking about in any position?
Can be seated or standing. Yes.
Breathing, arm movements, and
Arm reaches and spinal movements. That's mini set 1. And you have to pick 2 other mini sets.
so basically, almost each absolute is a bit of a mini set,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Each mini set has, it's not one exercise, it's like a little
Right.
conglomeration of movements. Yeah.
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 bridges.
Okay. So that's mini set. What is that, Jana? Is that 6? Do you have that in front of you?
Mini set, she said, what
For
did she say?
bridges. Bridges.
Bridges is number 7, according
7.
to this piece of paper
Okay,
that
that's
was in
fine.
the front.
Yeah. Mini set 1, 7, and one more,
This has been so
Gabriella.
helpful, by the way.
Good.
And um, um, feet.
Feet. Okay, so mini set 1 and mini set 2 and 7. Foot and ankle. Okay. Okay, great. And then Paige is going to do mini set 3, which is Pakwa. And mini set 3, 4, and 8. And then Tere, if you wouldn't mind to teach mini sets 5, 9, and 10 and 11.
I just joined. So hi everybody. So we're gonna do this starting class or?
No,
Okay.
starting next week.
Oh, okay.
This is just so you can be prepared. So you're going
Okay,
to
so-
teach 5, 9,
Uh-huh.
10, and 11. And you could do
5, 9, 10, and 11.
and just do the cardio boost marching too.
Okay,
All right. So you'll do all of that next week.
okay.
Okay. Gabriella's going to do 1, 7, and 2, and Paige is doing 3, 4, and 8. And there's not a specific order. So Gabriella, when it's your turn to teach, you're going to teach 1, 7, and 2 in a row. Okay. Or 1, 2, and 7.
Okay.
Okay, great. So let's go ahead. Tere, did you get the information for section 6 as well? Because
I
we're going to
did.
do, okay, good. We're
I
going to
did.
start with 6 today.
Okay.
Okay, so let me go. Any questions for anybody before I pull up the sharing the screen thing? Let me get it. One sec. Okay, here we go. Okay, so today we are starting with section 6, which is spinal asymmetry, scoliosis, fascia, and Parkinson's. So you may not realize this, but they go together. Oops, here's Paige, perfect timing. Let me get her in. Hey, Paige, perfect timing. We were just starting. Quick note, I just assigned some mini sets that you're going to start teaching next week. So at the end, I'll tell you what yours are. You don't have to worry about it now. All right. I just started saying that we are going to go into section 6, which is spinal asymmetry, scoliosis, an introduction to fascia, and all of that with Parkinson's disease. And then I started to say that you may not realize this, but Parkinson's disease and spinal asymmetry actually go together. And they go together because of the nature or the physiology of Parkinson's disease. How it manifests and unfolds will pull the person into a asymmetrical spinal position. So in this section, we're going to learn about basically what is scoliosis and spinal asymmetry. We're going to talk about global postural assessments and how to identify spinal asymmetry, different kinds of really basic exercises for scoliosis and spinal asymmetry, where we're going to begin if we have a neurological and an orthopedic condition together. And we're going to start to talk about fascia and the meridians. Before we jump into it, just really quickly, who here has experience with or has taken courses, workshops, or has knowledge about scoliosis and spinal asymmetry? Yeah.
I have a little.
You have, Jana, you have a little. Tere,
a
I know
little.
you do. Okay, good. How about you, Gabriella?
Not in particular scoliosis,
Okay, no worries.
but in yin yoga and the Chinese meridians and all of
Yeah,
that.
you have that in knowledge. Okay, cool, good. So let's start then very appropriately on basically what is scoliosis and spinal asymmetry. According to Dr. Suzanne Martin, who I studied with, and I feel like she's quite brilliant, she says that scoliosis is basically a garbage can term encompassing many individual permutations of a spiraling spine. So when you think about what scoliosis is, it's a curve in the spine. And that curve can be in the sagittal plane, it can be in the frontal plane, it could be in multiple planes at the same time. And this is something that needs to be addressed because obviously if the spine is not aligned, it will affect movement and in particular ambulation and gait. So you're walking. What is scoliosis and spinal asymmetry? So we've already established that it's really any curvature of the spine. It affects 2 to 3% of the population, which is approximately 6 to 9 million people in the United States alone. It generally has idiopathic origins. However, It also can develop because of poor habits. So for example, carrying a heavy bag on your shoulder for many, many years, sitting at the computer like this for habitual long time frames, doing things where you maybe play a sport and you are dominant on one side and you force that side constantly, like let's say in a swinging or a racket sport, you can encourage a spinal asymmetry from those types of activities. It can also be caused due to a neurodegenerative condition like Parkinson's disease. It can occur from other neurodegenerative conditions like multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's, just anything that affects the neurological system will start to reshape the musculoskeletal structure, and in particular, the spine. So as of this time, there's really not a known cure. So what we strive for when we're working with someone who has scoliosis or a spinal asymmetry is to make the condition manageable and to teach them what we call correctives and teach people how to identify their own spinal asymmetry, because obviously you can't do anything about it unless you know where it is or what direction it's going in. Okay. So just kind of a drive-by overview of signs and symptoms of spinal asymmetry. And for going forward, I'm just going to call it spinal asymmetry. I'm not going to say scoliosis and spinal asymmetry. It's just, spinal asymmetry. Uneven shoulders, uneven waist. You may see one hip higher than the other. One side of the rib cage might be jutting forward a wee bit more than the other side, or a lot. One side of the shoulder blade would be more prominent, and prominence on one side of the back when bending forward. So this is where you have someone bend forward and you can see an obvious raise on one side of the back versus the other. So these are just very general signs and symptoms. But what I want you to be able to do is start to be able to just look at a glance and immediately see what's going on. This is a skill set which is invaluable and will give you so much information for your programming. So another thing to consider is that when you've got a spinal curve in any degree, it will reduce the amount of space within the chest, making it difficult for the lungs to function properly. Okay, so now it affects the respiratory system. Why do we do Pilates for scoliosis and spinal asymmetry? Well, there's multiple reasons, but one of them is that Pilates helps to reshape fascial tissue. Pilates uses other elements of other methods, or Pilates for Parkinson's does, to help refortify a spinal asymmetry, making it more upright. Pilates promotes stability. It allows new motor reflex strategy. It promotes proprioception, which is very important, and teaches motor control to keep the spine stable. And then here, what I want to recommend to you is, if you do not have a firm working knowledge of scoliosis and spinal asymmetry, I highly suggest that the next workshop or course, or maybe a book you get, will be this one, Spinal Asymmetry and Scoliosis, because it's really like an amazing reference manual. Mine is completely full of little tabs and notes everywhere, and it's just a wonderful reference that will help you tremendously. Now, according to Dr. Suzanne Martin, this is her method, Pilates Therapeutics, and these are the principles in working with spinal asymmetry and scoliosis. So what she says, and she's given me permission to share this, is that to begin with, you have to classify 4 areas. First is you have to identify the curve. So where is the curve? You're looking for a concavity and a convexity. So the way I look at it is, if these were your ribs and this is let's see if I can get it. There we go. If these are the ribs and this is the normal, the convexity will be the side that's squished. I mean, the concavity will be the side that's squished down. The convexity will be the side that's spread open. So if I have, which I do have a mild spinal asymmetry, but if I'm like this, and this is my left and this is my right, what side is my concavity? Anybody except for Tere.
The left.
The left is my concavity. Right. And the way I think of it, this is just an easy way for me to remember it. You can create any mnemonic you want, but I think of a cave. It's small, it's dark, it's kind of condensed, right? When I think of convexity, I think of an X, like a giant X, because the legs of the X are spread out wide. So the concavity and the convexity. Before you address any kind of movement or I don't want to say prescribe, but suggest any movement, you have to be able to identify this first, okay? So you'll first look at the person, and if you see a drop in a shoulder, automatically you know there's spinal asymmetry. Even if it's a habitual one that they've just created and it can be pulled out or stretched out, that's fine. But still, you have to be able to identify where the curve or where the drop is. Next, that Dr. Martin talks about is that you want to be able to break up the curve. So if we look at a spine, it's got two lordotic and two kyphotic curves, right? So the lordotic curves would be the back of the neck and the low back, right, where the thoracic and the lumbar spine join, which is also where a lot of injury occurs. Those are the two lordotic curves. The two kyphotic curves are the thoracic spine and the sacrum. Those kind of curve out, right? And the lordotics curve in. And the curves match. So for example, if we're thinking about a lordotic curve of the cervical vertebrae and the lower thoracic and the lumbar vertebrae, whatever happens up here in the cervical is going to trigger something in the lumbar area. You see this a lot when you put people into the prone position for Pilates movements like swan, swimming, prone 100, anything where they have to lay on their tummy and they have to raise their thoracic cage or their upper body. So if you notice when people do swan, baby swan, or full swan, they'll come up like this and their head will kick back. These would be for people who don't have a lot of experience, or maybe they're just learning the exercise, right? Or they think that pushing away and kicking their head back maybe is giving them more uprightness, more height. When actually what happens, and you can try this on yourself next time you're prone, maybe you'll lay on your tummy. If you lift your thoracic cage, all of a sudden, if you kick your head back, it's going to go right into your low back. So this is why we always want to maintain length through the cervical spine and throughout the thoracic spine and the lumbar. It should look like a gentle ski slope, like a bunny hill, okay, for skiers. So once we identify the curve, then we need to break up the curve. And what that means is that when you look at the spine, you have to be able to identify more or less where that curve is occurring. Is it occurring on the upper part of the thoracic cage, just below the cervical, maybe T1 to T8, something like that? If so, then you know that that's the area. You're going to break up that area, both at the beginning of the curve, the end of the curve, and then you're going to try and do some corrective work on the concavity side of where the curve is. And then you're going to redirect the curve. So redirecting the curve would be if it is a curve that's going, the convexity is on this side and the concavity is this side. Redirecting the curve means you're going to do corrective exercises that are going to help to open that left side and maybe release the right side. Okay. And then, oopsie, hold on, I lost, there we go. And then you're going to correct the curve. So you want to do movements and exercises that are going to make the curve kind of go away from bending this way. Maybe it's going to go that way. And then eventually the correction will be as upright as possible. Remember that we can't permanently fix it. We're not, and we're also not doctors or orthopedists. So the best we can do is apply corrective exercise and try to help a person be able to see when they're dropping into their curve, right? Also, one other thing that I want to mention to you is that a lot of times when people come to you and they complain about back pain, look at their posture. And then after, as they're doing different things, like as they walk, as they sit down in a chair, if you're just having a conversation, watch how they will feed into their curve. Example, let's say I have a drop on my left, right? And then I sit down in a chair and I tend to lean on my left arm on the arm of the chair. And then I take my right leg and I cross it over the top of my left. Well, now I'm sitting like this. So now I am actually feeding into my curve. So you will see that all the time. And the easiest corrective is to teach your clients to do the opposite of what they're doing. I mean, if you can do nothing else, just tell them never cross right over left. You're going to always cross left over right. And you'll put maybe a pillow here so that they don't collapse, and maybe lean on the right. Or you tell them to change their seating position. Like if they favor sitting on the left side of the couch because that's where they can lean, then you have to tell them it would probably be better for you to sit on the right side of the couch, because now they don't have anything to drop into. They have to lean to the opposite side. So these are like really simple fixes. They sound like nothing, but they go a long way. And then just the reminder that we're managing scoliosis. We're not necessarily making it go away. And when we think about managing all of this, the identify, break up, redirect, and correct, it comes in stages. And these are kind of like learning stages. So somatic is the awareness bit first. First, you got to know that it's happening, and then you have to be able to see it. You have to be able to identify it. Once you're aware of it, then you can start with correctives like, oh, I'm crossing my right leg over my left. I got to switch that, which honestly, I do all the time. I'm constantly correcting myself. And then conditioning. The more you correct it, it automatically becomes just a condition where you automatically now, when you sit, you cross your left over the right. It's just like rehabituating yourself to different movements, and in this case, correctives. So our big goal here is to help our clients change a structural problem through lifestyle management. Those are the things about how are you sitting? Where are you sitting? What are you doing at the computer? Or how are you driving or looking at your phone? So through lifestyle management and exercise, we can turn this structural problem into more of a functional one. Okay. Now, when we think about scoliosis and spinal asymmetry, there are always two laws at work here. One is called Wolff's Law and the other is called Davis's Law. Now, Wolff's Law of bone remodeling talks about or establishes that bone is a dynamic tissue. So bone can grow and reshape and remold, and especially bones of children, which is why a lot of scoliosis testing is done when for adolescents. And bone can grow and remodel in response to the forces placed on it, okay? This can't be more true than, I have one quick anecdote. I had a client, very healthy woman, perfectly fine, but she was always like this. And she's like, I never had scoliosis as a child. Nobody ever said anything. And I said, well, that's interesting. But what it turned out was she was in Silicon Valley, and she was part of the very first, when all the laptops came out and they weighed like 20 pounds each. She used to carry a heavy laptop on her shoulder, the same side shoulder, for 17 years. So it just pulled her into this. Now, of course, she's a bit older, but still the bone is responding to the compressive force placed on it. Concurrently, Davis's law of soft tissue adaptation is reforming the tissue matrix along the lines of stress. So that collagen matrix that supports the bone and coats the muscle, all of that is now starting to take on a shape to support the weight of that 20-pound computer bag for 17 years. Because remember, fascia is a connective tissue that's throughout our entire body. It completely takes up every single crevice of space. It coats our muscles, our nerves, our bones. It's just everywhere. So if the bone is being pulled, the fascia is going to change its structure as well. And then it's going to start to mold into that new matrix and that new form. And the collagen matrix remodel forms randomly. Okay, so if you look on the left side, this is relaxed muscle with no adhesions. This is what the fascial matrix kind of looks like. It's kind of like covers it. And if you ever buy one of those holiday hams or holiday chickens or whatever, it's got that mesh bag that's around it that's kind of like stuck to the meat or whatever. However, if something happens to that muscle or that bone where it's not fully formed, then the collagen matrix starts to change, and maybe it'll ripple, maybe it'll bunch up, and you start to get things called adhesions or knots as well. So this will start to not only support the new alignment or misalignment, but it will also start to cause discomfort and pain. So a lot of times people's pain or their discomforts, the back pain they complain about, is actually can be due to adhesions or knots in their fascial tissue, or a pulling of the tissue from the X sling. So maybe they have a hip issue and their right shoulder hurts, even though it was the left hip that's bothering. So that would be a clear example of those fascial slings or fascial meridians getting pulled in uneven ways. So of this slide, you need to just remember that those two rules, those two laws always go together. And you can see that they're linked here. These are two links. So the most prevalent example for women is the bunion. This is a normal phalange, the toe, but the shaping of the shoes will change and displace the toe so that the joint becomes subluxed and the bone deviates. Once this happens, and if it's not corrected, the fascial tissue will remold to support this new structure. And then you're going to get this. And you cannot correct it. It has to be surgically changed. Has anybody seen extreme bunions before, where the toe literally goes into a, yeah, I know, it's such a bummer, but it is what it is. Okay. So before I get into camptocornea, any questions about Wolff's law and Davis's law? No? Okay, let's go into camptocornea. Now, camptocornea and Parkinson's disease. First question, has anyone here ever seen, oops, hold on one second, because this keeps coming off. There we go. Has anyone ever seen someone who has camptocornea? This would be someone who is bent over in almost a 90-degree angle. So if you look at my cursor over here on the far left, I know this picture is a little bit vague here or blurry. I don't know why, but anyways, you still get a sense of what's going on here. Show of hands, has anybody ever seen this? Yeah, you have? Maybe, okay. So it is not a common condition, right? But it is something that can tend to happen towards the end or towards the more advanced stages of Parkinson's disease. And it's important that you're aware of it so that when someone walks in your studio shaped like this, whether they have Parkinson's or not, you won't freak out and think there's nothing I can do here. There's still a lot you can do. Now, what causes this? What a lot of the research is showing is that it may be an axial dystonia. So remember that dystonia is where there's muscle that has uncontrolled movement or it's unsupported movement, and axial means the axial skeleton. So if you think about the spine, it's supported by the erector spinae, which are 3 groups of muscles. So closest to the spine is the spinalis muscles. Then the next line of muscles are the iliocostalis muscles, I think they're called. I may be saying that wrong. And then on the farther outside are the longissimus muscles. Okay, so hopefully I got that right. But essentially, those 3 lines of muscles are what support the spine. So those muscles that connect into the axial skeleton, which is the spine, are experiencing a dystonia. So they're not strong enough to support the weight of the upper body into an erect posture. And it's only apparent when the person is standing. It's most apparent when the person is standing. It's less apparent, but still obvious when the person is sitting. And it is not visible at all when the person is lying down. And this could be because when the person is in the supine position, those muscles are relaxed and off. They're not working. Those muscles turn on only as soon as you have to erect the spine, right? So camptocormia is abnormal flexion of the trunk when standing or walking. It disappears in the supine position. It may be implicated with the pedunculopontine nucleus. It may represent a specific form of Parkinson's disease, like multiple system atrophy. So remember in the very beginning, we talked about different Parkinson's plus disorders. So one of the more prevalent aspects of multiple system atrophy would be camptocormia. It generally doesn't come before Parkinson's disease, and it's generally not even seen in the early stages of PD, but usually it can come many years after the onset of PD. So these are more advanced stages of Parkinson's. And the other thing to know is that the dopaminergic medications make it worse. So in some people who have Parkinson's plus disorders, they can't use dopaminergic medications because they can have either no effect or they make it worse. And the origin is unknown. Okay. All right. So now let's get into global posture assessment. And let me move the little, there we go. Global posture assessment to identify asymmetry. So global postural assessment is a scientific method employed to evaluate the alignment of various anatomical landmarks to identify musculoskeletal abnormalities. How many of you, and no judgment, just curiosity, when you get a new client in, do you do a postural assessment? Okay, not so much.
We do.
Okay,
All of them.
yeah, Teddy, I know you do. I know you've got a protocol. What about you, Gabby? Do you do somewhat or not too much, or you're muted? You're muted. Gabby, you're muted. Can't hear you. Paige, you said you do or you don't?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Not immediately,
Okay.
because I think they get immediately self-conscious.
Yeah,
I
that's
will
fine.
work it in.
Yeah.
Like you said.
Okay. That's just to have an idea of how you're working. Now, when you work with someone who has Parkinson's disease, we haven't gotten to this yet. This comes later, which is how we use our forms, how we do our assessments. We will always start with a global posture assessment. Why? Does anybody have an idea? Like, think about what our method is. I just want to hear if you can kind of put these 2 puzzle pieces together. Why would we start with a global posture assessment? I'll give you a clue. What are the 3 primary categories that we work in? when we work with a person with Parkinson's disease. There's 3. All the exercises either hit 1, 2, or all of these 3 categories. What are they? Tere?
I mean, the axial elongation.
Elongation.
Well, axial elongation is one of the Pilates principles. Okay, so let me put this together for you.
Mhm.
When we use the Pilates for Parkinson's method, our baseline of exercises is called the 11 absolute, right? In the 11 absolute mini sets, we have 3 categories that we are constantly looking at and reinforcing with those 11. They are upright posture, spinal mobility, and preserving ambulation and gait, right? Everything we do is going to fall into one of those buckets. It's going to help one of those buckets, right? So if we think, I talked about this in the beginning of the course, if we think about those 3 things, posture, spinal mobility, walking, right? The posture affects the spinal mobility, affects the walking. So if I have somebody who's bent over, has camptocormia, has a spinal asymmetry or scoliosis, the first thing I need to do is to get them as upright as possible. Otherwise, the spinal mobility bit and the walking, anything I do for walking, is not going to be as effective. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, you got to get them as upright and pulled up as possible. And that starts with a global posture assessment. I'll give you a quick example. I've been traveling for the last 10 days. That means that I haven't seen my clients who I usually see every single week. I haven't seen them for about 10 days. So day before yesterday, it was, yesterday, Tuesday, I had a client that I hadn't seen. And when he opened the door, the first thing I saw was he had dropped much more significantly. So I knew, number 1, he hadn't been doing his exercises. And number 2, where I needed to start was to pull him out first. Because if I just put him right into whatever exercise I wanted, I'm not going to get as much output, beneficial output from him. And he's not going to feel as good for as long than if I did start with pulling him out of that flexed and tightness, that tight position. So you're always going to look at the posture first, and that's going to give you a really great starting clue as to where you have to build your programming. Now, even if your client comes in and says that their primary motor symptom is rigidity, or maybe they've got an axial dystonia and they're moving a lot, like a dyskinesia, it doesn't matter. I would always start with lengthening and pulling out the posture first. This is also reflected in what the number 1 mini set is. The very first mini set is what? Spinal movements. Breathing. So we need to break up the tightness through the thoracic cage and through the sides. Arm reaches, which if you're doing this, look what's happening to my spine, look what's happening to my ribs. I'm still trying to gain more mobility. Then I go into the spinal movements. And overall, it's one way that I can already start uprighting the posture. Make sense? Okay. Now, when we're looking for spinal asymmetry, we're like, and this is more me probably, I feel like I'm like a detective. When someone comes in, I look at their body and I just start analyzing, oh, look at that, or this, or, and it's really hard to turn off. But it's also kind of fun to guess everything in your head and then to ask them, and then they tell you, right? So when we have a client, what I like to do is stand them up against some landmarks. That could be a doorway. So you see here on the far right, a doorway that has distinct markings of a frame. And then you've got this baseline here. It could be a window. It could be a column, a table that's very positioned, very square. So you have to look around. If it's in your studio, it could be your Cadillac, because you've got those uprights on the Cadillac. It could be against the springboard. It could be anywhere that has vertical and horizontal lines that are very obvious and distinct. Okay. When you put them up for that, you are looking first for the plumb line. Do you guys know what the plumb line is? So the plumb line, if you look at my cursor, do you see this little red line here that's above her head? I set that with tape. This is the plumb line. So when you set that, that's where the line is that you're looking to go right down the center of the body. Once you set the plumb line, you've established like what the right and the left sides are. And you can also clearly see twists in the posture. Because from the line, if you see more of the back of the head on the right, she's clearly twisting to the left. If you see more of a dip of the head, you know, in another direction, then you can see more of the head on one side than the other. So these are ways to use the plumb line and to draw this giant like cross so you can see both a horizontal and a vertical alignment or misalignment. You're looking for misalignments and asymmetry. By the way, by nature, natural creatures are asymmetrical. Plants are asymmetrical, humans are asymmetrical. Actually, perfect symmetry is unnatural. So just keep that in mind. We all have asymmetry to some degree or another. Okay. When we look at a person to determine spinal asymmetry, I look from the front and I look from the back and I look from the side. Now, to go to Gabriella's point about how people are self-conscious when they first come in, yes, that's true. They are self-conscious. So maybe I do a little bit of chatting first before we get going, and then I'll casually say, okay, well, you know what? Let's look at your posture real quick. Let's see where we're going to start with this whole thing. You know, you keep it friendly and stuff, but the truth is you got to see where you're going to start, or you got to see what's happening before you start doing stuff, right? So let's look at the girl on the left. And by the way, this is a client or was a client. This is the traditional pattern drops. You have a shoulder drop, which one line goes down. Then you have the opposite hip drop. So the opposite hip drops down. And then you have a twist. You're always going to have a twist when you have a bend. A bend in the frontal plane will always be accompanied with a twist that's going to protrude into the sagittal plane. Okay. If we look at this person, and one of you just shouted out, where's the concavity? Where's the convexity? Anybody?
Concave on the left.
Correct. Correct. You can tell because look, here's the cave. It's like kind of coming in a bit, right? Here's the convexity. It's raised over here. It's wider here. You can almost see the channel going in this C curve like this. So, and in all fairness, she has a double scoliosis. So it's a little bit.
I was just going to say that because, Ceci, I was going to say that because Boyo, my son, has a triple scoliosis. He has neck, thoracic, and lumbar. So it just doesn't have to be one. It could be
exactly.
more than two.
So we talked about that. Yes. And then what's going to happen when one side is concave and one side is convex, or you have multiple curves, is that the position of the pelvis is going to change. So in this case, not only is the pelvis dropped, but the pelvis on the right side will be sticking out to the back, while the pelvis in the front will be sticking out more to the front. Okay. Oops, sorry. And here we're going to use landmarks, musculoskeletal landmarks, to detect the curvature. So if we observe alignment using the plumb line, which I talked about, here's the plumb line, and we draw that imaginary line down the center. These are the musculoskeletal landmarks we're going to use to identify the curves. We look at the shoulders. I always do top down is how I look at my clients. So if you're looking top down, you're going to see the head turning or dropping first. So you just make a note of that. Then you look at the shoulders. Well, there's an obvious drop on that left shoulder. Then you look for scapular winging. So here, the left scapula is popping back more than the right. You can look for a waist crease. These are called frank rolls, and they're deepest on the left side. So if you see rolls on the person's low back, like at the waist level, you want to see where there's more rolls. Are there more rolls on one side or the other? Because that's going to tell you that there is a curve present, okay? Then we look at the lumbar prominence. So the lumbar is right in this area here. And this will be very easy to see if you look at the clothing. And when you have a person and you're going to do an assessment, don't let them fix their clothes. Just have them stand there. A lot of times they want to stand and they want to kind of like, you know, get themselves reconfigured. Don't let them do that. Because if anything, if you need to do just a quick and dirty assessment, you don't even need to stand them up anywhere against anything. All you have to do is have their feet parallel, which I use a yoga block. I'll have them stand with their feet, one on either side of a yoga block, and just stand there, and I can see it in their clothing. So this is where you want to get as well. Or maybe you're already there, I don't know. And then you're looking at the head also to see which way it's compensating. So in her case, she's compensating right of COG, which is center of gravity. Her right lateral thoracic prominence. So this is her thoracic cage. It's wider on this side. There's more area on this side. And the right upper back raise, this is where she has kind of like a hump. And that's because the rib cage is pushing out a little bit. And then upper to lower trunk alignment is offset right. So if you look at her upper trunk, that goes from the waist up, and then the lower trunk from the waist down, you can see that the upper trunk is offsetting to the right and the lower trunk is offsetting to the left. And then in section 9, you'll get those forms so you can start to use them to create these types of observations and assessments. And musculoskeletal landmarks, and scan the body for asymmetries from these points. Yeah, so this just kind of gives you an easy way to find an asymmetry or to see if one exists. Okay. And then we're going to go into a little bit more about lateral and anterior views. Now, if you give me 1 second, let me check for Gabby, because she popped out and I don't know if she's trying to get in. No. Okay. When we look from the lateral and the anterior views, you will see different things. So one thing you always want to look for is the anterior head carriage. So in this case, that's where the head's going to jut forward like this. And that comes from a kyphotic spine in the upper thoracic cage. So as the spine bends down, the head drops too. And the weight of the head, which is an average of 8 to 12 pounds, is going to drop forward. It's heavy, right? So it's here. But the brain needs information of where we're going. So the brain will make the head tip up like this so that the eyes can be level. So what happens there is as the bend comes more into the kyphotic, more flex, the neck will extend more and the head will turn up. So for every 1 inch forward from the center of gravity, we are adding approximately 10 pounds of pressure to the base of the cervical vertebrae. That would be right here, if you can see where my pointer is. So this area here has 10 pounds of pressure for every inch forward. So in this case, I think she's 39.37 millimeters forward. I don't know what that is in I don't know if anybody want to convert the millimeters into inches, but whatever that is times 10, that's how much pressure is right here. Okay. The other thing that happens is it weakens the neck because the scalenes and the sternocleidomastoid are constantly on. And then those deeper neck muscles don't work as well. Those deeper neck muscles, the one that make the little X in the middle of the neck, those are responsible for helping you dip your head in those diagonal ways. And that comes, remember, we work with those in the Pakwa. So those movements are really important. But essentially, you're changing the muscle strength and the muscle mobility just from a poor posture, just from the flexion. Okay, and then last thing I want to point out here is when you're looking from the side, you will clearly see the kyphosis and the lordosis. So in this case, when the pelvis comes forward, when you have any kind of, oh, here's Gabriella. When you have any kind of like an posterior tilt, where there's a deeper dip in the back, the glutes are going to be turned off. So if you notice, she doesn't really have any kind of glute musculature. Her glutes are off, which means what? What does that tell me if I'm thinking about what exercises are going to be important for her? Anybody? Just throw out whatever you think. If you see glutes off, what does that tell you? You'll have to unmute to comment.
Squats and lunges.
She's got to strengthen her glutes, and squats and lunges will be best. Right. Yeah. Good. Good, Jenna. So let's talk about maybe some exercises specific for scoliosis and spinal asymmetry. Now, this course is about Parkinson's disease. So I'm not going to go into a whole thing about what the exercises are for scoliosis and spinal asymmetry. That's why I'm encouraging you to take some sort of extra workshop or get a book or take a course. I love the course I took. I think you would love it too if you get an opportunity to study with Dr. Martin. But you can also simply go online and look for some of the really well-known exercises that are specific for scoliosis and spinal asymmetry, like the SEAS exercises. These are scientific exercises approach to scoliosis. I think this is an Italian method. I'm not sure, but this is a whole program and course in itself. Pilates Therapeutics, that's where I studied, and this is really where I learned how to assess client posture quite well. And then worst case scenario, if you've got somebody who comes in with a severe or a significant or an obvious drop on one side or the other or a curve, the best thing you can do to start with are the breathing exercises to open up the concave side. So the easiest thing to do is a lateral flexion stretch. So if my concavity is on the left, I'm going to open. So my left arm's going up and over. I'm going to stay there. You can have them grab something and pull away. You can have them push into a wall or a stable object, and then you'll have them breathe there. So inhale through the nose, inflating the concave side. Exhale through the mouth or nose. And a really great cue is sometimes I'll put my hand on their ribs and I'll say, breathe into my hand. And they'll inhale and you can feel it, right? So you want to do that at least 8 times. So you can get a little bit more mobility through that tight side. And then one other thing that I will say is that if you are going to do lateral flexion, and this is how I do it, and I want to open a concave side, I will always start from the concave, do the other side, finish on the concave. So if the concave is left, I'm always going to go left, right, left, so that I open and I finish opening. So when you're done with the exercise, that left side stays open. You don't like do the left and then you do the right and then you're done because now I've just closed it again. Right? So you want to make sure once you identify where the curve is, that you work like that, left, right, left, or whatever the concave to concave side is. Also, remember that in Pilates, we always work both sides. So that's why you don't want to just open that one side and not do the rest of it, right? We need the mobility on both sides, but we need to finish with an open concavity or trying to open the concavity. All right. And then if you look here, this is an example of a woman, a young woman who clearly has scoliosis, but what she's done, and this is her doing it on her own, she's able to identify where her curve is, to break up her curve, to redirect her curve, and then to correct the curve. And so you can see the difference in the curve here. This is very dramatic there. She's even got a shadow there, to where she's much more upright here. And you can tell because her bra top got moved from where it was, right? And then this is where she was before the corrective exercises and after the corrective exercises. That's pretty amazing. And once again, we can't fix it. We're not here to make it disappear. We can only help to make it more functional and also help to make it less painful, less uncomfortable, less tight. All right. Questions so far? All right. It's 5:30 now. Do you want a bathroom break, a 5-minute, get some water, get some tea, use the bathroom, whatever? Okay,
Yes, sure. Thank you.
Let's do that. So it's 5:32. Let's come back at 5:37 or whatever that translates to in your time. Okay. Right. See you in 5 minutes. Okay. Paige, can you see my screen? What do you see? Just the drive menu?
Yeah, like welcome to drive.
Oh, okay, but nothing else, right?
Mm-mm.
Okay, okay, that's fine. Yeah, I was just curious because I have multiple screens open.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
There we go. Let me bring this out. And
Yep.
okay, hold on one second. Okay, let me go back to the. Okay, we got everybody back. Looks like Ted popped out. Okay, that's fine. All right, welcome back.
Sorry. I just have one little question because
Sure.
my computer went off. Um, just for corrective exercises, was there only the expansion breathing, or was there a section that I missed?
No, well, first I recorded it, so I'll send you it so you'll get to see it.
I'll review it
But
later.
yeah, but I didn't give more exercises because, as I was saying, my purpose is to teach you about scoliosis and spinal asymmetry and how it relates to Parkinson's disease, and not
Okay.
necessarily to teach you all the exercises. So you'll have to do a little bit of research and learning.
I do know a few, and with TED, we learned a few
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, TED is a really good source for scoliosis and spinal asymmetry exercises because her son does have a triple scoliosis. So she's very familiar with that work and can definitely share a lot of great knowledge.
Yeah, I did some courses with her, and
Nice.
she's great. I don't know where she is now, but you can
I
let
don't
her
know.
know.
She just popped out, but you know, everybody's kind of popping in and out. But anyways, hopefully she'll be back.
Oh, that's
Okay.
my daughter.
Oh, here she is. Let me get her in. Ted, are you there?
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, yeah, good. So we're just starting back, and we just mentioned, Gabriela mentioned that she's taken some scoliosis and spinal asymmetry stuff from you, and I mentioned that you are a very good source because your son does have the triple scoliosis. So you've been working with that basically his whole life, right?
Yeah, so he's been with his scoliosis since I think he began in his teenage years. I didn't, it was not very obvious, but then he had an issue with his growth hormone and he had low muscle tone. So I think that contributed a lot for it to get really bad. And it was part of his syndrome, you know, for some reason, genetic wise. I've read on it and it's common, but I guess it's because of the low muscle tone in these bodies. They're like fight or dido kind of bodies, you know, like they're long and thin, slim, but they're no muscle. So that contributes a lot to the spinal symmetry to be really into that kind of scoliosis. And Boyo's gotten really bad in 10, 12 years, 13 years.
Yeah.
He's gone through a bunch of stuff. Yeah.
I was just mentioning that I learned the postural assessment and all that scoliosis thing from you in one of our
One of our in our module three teacher training. And you know, Ceci was talking about how the posture starts from the head down. I start from the feet up, and
either
you know,
way.
it's just different, but we still get to the same purpose.
But although I will say that I set the feet first. So I set the feet first, I look at the feet, and then I'm just like, okay, and then I go up and come down. So yeah, there's
No.
different ways to do it. You get more or less the same information. Just do what works for you and what makes the client, less aware, Okay, so that being said, let's go back to this. We've got two very prevalent conditions, a neurological condition on one side, which is Parkinson's disease, which, remember, time is of the essence. They've already lost 60 to 80% of the dopamine by the time they're diagnosed. So there's no time for experimenting. There's no time for guessing. They got to get moving, right? And most beneficial is if they get moving with the movements that are needed to strengthen their musculoskeletal system and kind of preserve their movement again, independence from degeneration. So that's on one hand. On the other hand, we've got an orthopedic condition where either they've got a very obvious scoliosis or a spinal asymmetry that is starting to come out. And in some cases, which I would say 70% of my clients that I start with, maybe even up to 80%, all have significant back pain. Okay. So you've got these two things working together. So if a person's coming into you and they've got those two things going on, where do you begin? What do you start thinking about first? So let me just, Jana and Ted, I already know this. So really, I want to hear the thinking behind where Gabriella would start and where Paige would start. So just throw something out. Like, what's the first thing you're thinking of?
Well, evidently, the spine flexion, but I would probably have them sit down first, sit down on the Cadillac with their feet over the Cadillac, with their feet supported by a box.
Right. But are you saying then you're going to focus first on the situation of the scoliosis and spinal asymmetry, or are you going to first focus on the neurological situation, the Parkinson's, and then work in the other stuff?
Parkinson's, when I see him sitting, I mean, if I'm not going to get him to stand immediately because I've just met him, I'm going to see a little bit how he's sitting, and from there start with some breathing.
Okay. How about
then
you, Paige?
A little bit of movement.
Yeah. No, that's totally fine. Paige, and by the way, there's different ways to do this. I just want to start to understand how you're thinking. Paige, are you going to start addressing the neurological condition or the orthopedic condition?
My answer is yes, because so many of the exercises are going to do both. Like the breathing is going to benefit both. The working on posture is going to benefit both, regardless of where the issue is coming from, even when they've got both conditions.
So your answer is you're going to start with both. Okay, good. Tere, you want to take it from here and explain?
What do you want me to explain?
Where
Well,
are you going to start?
I'm up for what Paige said. I would go both ways. I can't leave behind the neurological condition depending on what stage they're in. So that would matter. That would be big for me to decide whether I start there or not. And if there is if I have a person that's in stage 1, I would definitely start with addressing the postural assessment and address the asymmetry and breathing and take it from there from step as we do in our Pilates principles.
Jana, what's the answer? Are you starting with neurological or an orthopedic condition? You're muted, unmute.
Again, I think it would depend on what stage they are, but I would start with that upright posture exercise. I would probably start with lifting up, do arm circles.
Okay, so all of
deep
those
breathing.
things are good. Yes, you are going to start with those, but I need you to think in a broader sense. When you have someone who walks in and you say, all right, this person's got Parkinson's, I got it. I know that they can't waste time. And then you see that the person is crumpled down like this, you need to start with the orthopedic condition. Why? Because if the person, remember, we're not going to get good movement if we can't get the best posture out of them. So in other words, all of your answers are correct, how you're thinking of how you're going to start with the posture, the standing, the stretching, that's all correct. But what I need you to do is think broader in terms of, are you going to address a neurological situation or an orthopedic condition? You have to address the orthopedic condition first, because you won't get good movement if they're slumped down. And even more importantly, if they're in pain, you will get nowhere. If they are in pain, they will give you as minimal output as possible, even though they may want to do everything for you, right? And the reason being is because when the body is in pain, the musculoskeletal pain will change their movement. The brain's going to tell the body to move differently or not to move at all, because it's trying to protect a sensitive area. And most of the time, people who have scoliosis or back injury, subluxation in the vertebrae, which is like a slip disc or a herniated disc or anything like that, it's going to create an asymmetry and it's going to create pain. And so the protective strategy that they are using is going to be mirrored in how they move and how they respond to what you want them to do. And if you have short-term pain, the brain says move less so you can heal. But if you have long-term pain and it's hurting all the time, your brain's going to want you to move more, because it has to find a new pattern, a new neural pathway. It has to develop a new neural pathway to get you to still be able to put your shoes and socks on, even though you're in pain. There's got to be a way to get my shoes and socks on, even though I can't bend over. Do you see what I'm saying? So if someone comes into you and the first thing you see is an asymmetrical drop, or the first thing they report when you're doing your assessment with them is, yeah, I always have this back pain. It's a right side back pain. They honestly, and I'll tell you from my experience, they really don't care what you have to say, unless you're talking about how to get them out of that right side back pain. All of a sudden, they have all the interest and they are listening intently to you. Do you see what I'm saying? So orthopedic condition, scoliosis and spinal asymmetry, that has to be looked at first. Once you get the pain to go away and the posture as upright as possible, then you can start in with some of the exercises. So I'm not saying don't use what you have in mind to use, because you are all correct in how you would start. But I want you to think of it on a bigger scale in terms of when someone walks in, what's the first thing you see? What's the first thing you hear? Drop, I'm in pain. That's going to be the topic of everything you're talking about for your first session, pretty much. And then you'll sprinkle in some things about Parkinson's as well. But that's just based on my experience and how I work. And then long-term modifications are going to become new motion strategies set by the brain's ability to learn new movement patterns. That's what we call neuroplasticity. Is that necessarily good or bad? What's your thoughts on that?
That's amazing.
That's amazing, but it could also be not good, because remember, the brain doesn't know if it's good or bad. It's just going to do the new neural pathway for what's working.
Yeah, well, I meant if we can get them to
Right.
get to the positive side.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
that's what I meant.
exactly. Yeah.
But it can also work the other end. You're right. I'm
Right,
sorry.
right. And that's why I need you to think like that. I need you to start thinking about, how you're going to work with clients, because yes, you do want them to have better movement patterns, which means you got to build new neural pathways, which that's going to happen in what stage? More.
Like 1 and
Stage
2.
one, yes, early stage. So that's the time that you're going to work on maybe some new movements and getting them out of pain, teaching them exercises to the breathing, the lateral flexion, whatever it is you have to do to get them out of pain. That's going to be the priority. And then, just keep in mind this note that the movement strategies generally are suboptimal, because when you're in pain, you start to make movements that will help you move, and help you stay out of pain. It doesn't mean your kinematics are good. Your kinematics could be terrible. Your movement could be slumped down with little tiny baby steps like that. Why? Because it moves you forward and it doesn't hurt. Okay? But that doesn't mean it's good for them. So we need to try and address the pain and the postural issues before anything else, so that they don't create more asymmetries and create more imbalance throughout the body. And then we come to fascia. So fascia and Parkinson's. Now, remember we talked about Wolff's law and Davis's law and how those are inextricably combined. They go together. That's in the case of having like a force load, which changes the position of the bone, or maybe they had an accident, or maybe they had a bone disease, or it could be anything. It could be osteoporosis or different types of osteo conditions, which are changing the way their posture is and the way they move. But we do have to remember that the relationship between disease advancement and disability is not linear. That means you can have a client who has PD and their PD is progressing, because we know that it's a progressive condition, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to move worse or they're going to have less movement. They actually could improve in their movement. And I think one example, which Tere is very aware of, is a client that she has at her studio named Berta, who she came and was a demo person for our first test outs. And she learned so much, and Tere was generous enough to let her keep coming back to the studio so her teachers could work with her and learn. So when we came back for the second course, she volunteered again to be a test out person. But the difference is that she looked better, she moved better, she felt better. She and her Parkinson's did progress, because when we very first started with her, she was in stage 1. So her tremor was predominantly one side. And by the time we saw her on the second course, she had tremor on both sides, one more than the other, but it was still bilateral. However, she looked amazing. She moved amazing. She even reported that she felt amazing. So again, the disease advancement is not linear to the disability. So keep that in mind as you're working with people. And when we think about this, how is that possible? How could that be? Well, possibly it's because the fascia is changing, okay? When we work with our clients, because they don't have dopamine and we can't go through the motor cortex so much anymore, the dopamine's not facilitating more smooth movement, we kind of have to think about ways, which is what the Pilates for Parkinson's method is, different ways to hack into the system to get better movement. And one of those hacks is through the fascia. So we are trying to release tight fascia. We're trying to release the myofascial meridians. We're trying to improve joint mobility. Other hacks are we work through the cerebellum. We take advantage of implicit and explicit learning. We take advantage of different stages so we know what to apply when. This is all part of the method. But coming back to this fascia, this is a very key way of helping a person feel better and move better. So when we think about what is fascia, well, first, quick show of hands. Has anybody here taken courses or workshops or read anything on fascia or fascial meridians? Not too much, not too much. Tere, I know. Gabriella, a little or not too much?
I read and worked with meridians.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay, so you've heard of it. You've heard of it. All right. So what we need to understand is first, what is fascia? So when you think about, when you prepare chicken and there's that white coating of skin, or it's not skin, it's like tissue, and you peel all that off and you throw it in the trash or whatever, that is actually fascia that's coating the muscles. And in the human body, we are covered in fascia. Every single thing in our body has a covering. It's like a peel or a lining or a coating, right? And on top of having a coating on every single thing in our body, whether that's bone, nerves, well, even if you think about a nerve condition called multiple sclerosis, I think that's the one, that is the deterioration of the myelin sheath. That's like the covering of the nerve. And once that starts to disintegrate, the nerves no longer can work properly. But fascia is something that not only is through the entire body, it's a connective tissue that has 6 to 10 times more sensory nerves than muscle. So if we are trying to get a person to move better and we can't get the brain to tell the muscle to move, maybe we can release the fascia. Maybe we can trigger even cellular memory in the muscle tissue to help the person move better. The other thing that's really important to know is that fascia is highly proprioceptive and nociceptive. So proprioceptive is it gives us a sense of where we are in space. For example, if our arms are extended, we more or less have an idea of how far away our hand is from our body, right? That has to do with your proprioception. And that's because there are proprioceptors in our fascia throughout our body. We also have, as another example, a base layer of proprioceptive receptors at the base of our skull, at the occipital ridge. And that gives us an awareness of where our head is in space, right? So it's proprioceptive and it's nociceptive. So nociceptive means it can feel pain. So when we think about fascia and neurosensory receptors, let's go back. I'm going to take you back so you can really get a great understanding of this. Give me one sec here. I'm going to take you back to one of the beginning, where's my 10, slides on feet. Do you remember the slide from the mini sets, the foot and ankle series, where it talks about the feet? Let me see if I can find it here. There we go. This one. Okay, so if you look at this slide, the bottom of the foot, we have the skin, right? Then right on top of the skin, we have a layer of fascia. It's called the plantar fascia, right? So we're all familiar with this. Inside the plantar fascia are all these different neurosensory receptors. They are embedded in the fascial tissue. Some of them feel light touch, some of them fine touch, vibration, heavy pressure, some vibration, pressure, and stretch, and some gross pressure and vibration. But the other thing that you have to know is in that fascial tissue, there's fast adapting and slow adapting neurosensory receptors. Why is that important? So if you put your hand in a fire, your quick reaction is to pull it out, right? Because your fast adapting neurosensory receptors are speaking up first. If everything were slow adapting or fast adapting, your hand would probably be stuck in the fire burning. So you feel the pain and you move away, then you feel the pain, right? So we need to keep in mind that the fascia is highly innervated. Let me go back to here. It can transmit information by tension through tension, like a spider's web. So if you think about a spider's web and a fly gets stuck on the bottom corner of the web, it starts to move. It sends information throughout the web. The spider could be all the way up at the very tip of the web in the tree practically. But if it feels a tiny little sensory movement, it's going to come down to get the fly, right? So your fascia is like that as well. And that's why also you have kind of like, you can have a offset pain where maybe you injured your left foot, but for some reason your lower right back hurts, or maybe it's your right hip, but for some reason your left upper shoulder hurts. It's all a web and it's all a chain and it's all transmitting information. Web-like and interstitial qualities allow it to reshape into and through the human structure with any deformity in an effort to maintain uprightness and function. So the job of the fascia is to help support the human body. And this interstitial quality, what that is that throughout the body, there's no spaces. Anything that looks like a space is filled up with a gooey substance like gel. And that is fascia as well, because fascia has different forms, different textures. So we can take advantage of this to help our clients. Look at these giant swaths of fascia. This is heavy support. This is the thoracolumbar fascia. If we look at the IT band here, right, or the cranium, all the fascia throughout the spine. I mean, these are areas that are fortified with this strong tissue. So why would working with fascia make a difference in exercise training for a person with PD? Well, it's equal or superior to the retina in terms of density of sensory nerve receptors. So we know that it can receive and send information quickly. It's incredibly adaptive, pliable, and contains muscle fibers. And it's where the memory and emotion of an injury reside. So this is super interesting. There's a lot of work by British Fascia Symposium does a lot of it. Her name is, well, first, Dr. Jan Trewartha. She's the head of that British Fascia Symposium. She and another fascial scientist, her name is Carol something, I forgot. But what they specialize in is when you have an injury, how do you release the fascia? Because remember, if there's any disturbance in the muscle or the bone, the fascia is going to reshape to that, right? I'll give you a very simple example. I was training someone and she tipped over and she was sitting in a chair and I didn't want her to fall. So I grabbed the chair. But one of the things I did was I took my hand and I hooked it under the arm of the chair. And so the chair was cutting into my arm because basically her 100 and something pounds was being held by the arm of the chair and my arm. So long story short, later what happened on my arm is there was a lot of pain, but then I started to notice that bumps started to come up. It was like one predominant bump. And I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, the fascial tissue got twisted, you know, like crumpled up. And so now I've got a knot there. So what these fascial therapists do is they teach you how to release the fascia. And it's so fascinating because it doesn't respond to pressure. It responds to very light touch. That's why, for example, people who roll themselves out with those foam rollers and they think they're doing this amazing thing with these styrofoam rollers, they're really not helping themselves. You need a soft, squishy roller to release the fascia because the more pressure you put on it, the more it'll tighten up, right? So you need something gentle. And what they teach is you have to do these tiny little movements that are really little. And then going back to that other slide, which I was showing you. Let's see here. If we look at the way the neurosensory receptors are positioned, they all are on the same nerve, right? But some are above the nerve, closer to the surface of the skin. Some are below the nerve, getting deeper into the muscle tissue or whatever. However, what happens is the Merkel's discs, which are very close, when they get triggered, they send information into the nerve. And what does that do? It wakes up all the other ones. So now everything's kind of like, okay, what's going on? So if you gently, because the Merkel discs respond to light touch, and the Meissner's corpuscles respond to fine touch and light vibration, they also respond to heavy pressure. But the point being here is light touch and light touch. You need very, very little to trigger the fascia. Okay, so keep that in mind. when you're working with your clients and you're trying to hack into the fascial tissue. You're not going to do heavy, like heavy pressure things. Something light. Maybe you start with them just, you can even, if you have any kind of manual therapy experience, Tere, I know you do, massage is great. People with PD are in such deep need of any kind of body work, but they won't go get it because of the anxiety they feel. So if you can do any kind of like, palpation, gentle or firm or smoothing or anything like that, that goes an incredibly long way. All right, let's keep going. We're almost here. So how do we work with a neurodegenerative disease and an orthopedic spinal deformity? Well, we have to consider an ordered approach. We have to remember that the nerves trigger the muscles and the muscles support the bones, right? But if the nerves aren't really getting good messages, they're not giving good information to the muscles. So the muscles really aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, which means the bones aren't staying structurally supported. That's why you see posture starting to deteriorate in Parkinson's disease, because the information from the basal ganglia coming down the nerves, the efferent information or efferent nervous system, which sends the information from the brain out back into the peripheral nervous system, it's not working right. It's not functioning correctly. This is also another reason why we train our clients barefoot. We need them to feel as much stimulation as possible so that the afferent information, the information that's uptake from the neurosensory receptors, is clean. It goes up to the brain. Because of the lack of dopamine, maybe they don't get as clean of information back, but they're going to get cleaner information than if they had socks or shoes on. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? Okay. Gabriella?
Yes.
Does that make, okay. All right. So we are trying to use the fascia to access the nervous system in someone who has faulty connections. We can't get them to do what we need from up here down. So maybe we can come in through the body. We can come in through cellular memory in the muscle tissue. We can come in through the implicit motor learning, stuff they already know, stuff they've already learned, right? To help them recall and to improve their movement. And finally, let's just look at some of this. So just a reiteration of the big picture of fascia. This is like a whole world unto itself. I love this information. But just to give you kind of like a glimpse into this world and why all of this is taken into consideration in how we develop the Pilates for Parkinson's method, we use the fascia. So it's an uninterrupted 3D web of tissue that extends from head to toe. Do any of you know who Thomas Myers is? He did the anatomy trains. And has anybody ever heard of Gil Hedley?
I have the
probably.
Myers, the Myers videos and the posture. They're very interesting. And I have his book.
Yeah. So those are two names that I would highly recommend if you're gonna kind of just look into a deeper understanding of fascia. You want to look into Thomas Myers. I would look into Gil Hedley, Gilhedley. There's a whole list of names I can give you, but those would be two good kind of like starters. And then one other thing that's really exciting is I'd say the top 3 fascial scientists in the world. One of them is Dr. Robert Schleip. He was at the British Fascia Symposium. On just a whim, I reached out to him. I told him what I was doing with Parkinson's and the website, and asked him his opinion about if he thought that working through the fascia could help people with Parkinson's disease. And he wrote me, I couldn't even believe it, he wrote me a letter back in response. It's on the P4P website if you go into perspectives. he wrote me a whole letter about undoubtedly he believes 100% that it could help. So that was pretty exciting that the top 3 fascial scientists in the world gave us that endorsement. So that's pretty exciting. And then fascia provides a matrix that allows for intercellular communication. This is really interesting too, because also in the fascial tissue is our immune system. So if you're not feeling well, the body knows right away what's going on where. So just keep that in mind. There's a lot of communication that's happening through the fascia that doesn't even need to go through the brain. It's just got its own system. It attaches, stabilizes, encloses, and separates muscles and other internal organs. So remember I was talking on the left, the image here, that gelatinous substance, that's that interstitial quality. It's throughout the entire body in that jelly form or gel form. And then here you can see it coating muscle tissue. This is from a cadaver, but you can see it's dried, the fascial tissue, but you understand what it looks like. So you see the white, it coats the muscle strands, the muscle fibers. It coats the blood vessels. It coats the nerves. It's on everything. And it maintains structural integrity, providing support and protection. And it acts as a shock absorber. So this is really interesting too. All our visceral organs, they're pretty much just hanging inside of us. But what gives them support is fascial tissue and that interstitial fascia. And then, of course, even in the fat that we have, there's fascia that surrounds the fat as well. So that creates shock absorption for us as we move about, protects the body's organs. It's the body's first line of defense against pathogenic agents and infections. And it's a band or sheet of connective tissue, which is composed primarily of collagen beneath the skin that permeates, interpenetrates, and surrounds everything within the human body. So I will give you an example of what a person with PD feels like, whose primary motor symptom is rigidity. So if we think about how the band or sheet of connective tissue beneath the skin that surrounds everything in the body, it's like wearing a wetsuit that's 2 sizes too small. Imagine what that would feel like. If you had a wetsuit, a diver suit on completely, and it was 2 sizes too small, and you were just constantly like feeling like this, whether you looked like it or not, you felt like that. That could be helped if we try and release some of the fascial tissue. Okay. After injury, it's the fascia that creates an environment for tissue repair. Okay. And then these are the myofascial meridians. They're also called fascial continuities. This comes from the work of Thomas Myers, and this is the book that Tere probably has. I have it too. There's several different books on it. But what he's done, and not all of these have been proven, but I think the first 3 here, or definitely the superficial back line has been proven in cadaver studies. The superficial front line has been proven in cadaver studies. And I believe it's the back functional line or the front functional line. So the other ones, you know, he says they exist. He shows them sometimes in some of his work, but scientifically accepted in the world, for sure, superficial back line, superficial front line, and one other, which I think is the functional lines. Okay. And then this information is really helpful for us. The one that I use a lot is the superficial back line and the spiral line. So on the superficial back line, if we are thinking about uprighting posture and how important that is, that's the fascial meridian we need to be concerned about. Which mini set, in your opinion, is going to help to strengthen this line? Anybody? Which mini set?
The Pakwa.
Okay, that's one option. Anybody else?
Spinal movements.
Spinal movements. Okay. Anybody else? Jana, you gotta unmute.
Some extensions.
Okay, and Tere, you there?
I'm here.
Which
Well,
which mini set is going to trigger the superficial back line to strengthen it?
if we get on at the 4-point position to do extensions
Okay, so the
or
correct
any
answer
extension,
is mini set that does the bridges.
bridging. Okay.
Posterior chain, right? We need this to be strong to keep us upright. So if we want to open the superficial front line, we're going to use extension. If we want to strengthen and improve mobility through the spiral lines, we're going to use what you said, Gabriella, spinal movements, right? And Paige, you talked about Pakwa. That would help with the arm lines. The arm lines and probably the back and the front functional lines, because you're working through this fascial tissue here and the fascial tissue in the front. Okay, so are you starting to kind of understand how the 11 absolute movements, they have been very researched. And so, you know, we can access myofascial meridians through those 11 absolute. We just want to be aware of where and what the meridians are, so that when we hear a client say, you know, I have back pain, well, we know we need to strengthen this. We need to find out where the pain is or what's causing it, right? To some degree. And then we can decide what exercises have to be applied. If we have a client who comes in and they have very limited rotation or lateral flexion, we know that we can use movements that'll open up and release the spiral lines, right? So those give you some examples.
I have a question about
Yeah.
this the superficial back line. Were you like saying that we need to strengthen that? Is that, I mean, does the fascia strengthen? Is that what you were saying?
The fascia supports the muscles. So if we strengthen the superficial back, if we strengthen the posterior chain of muscles, the fascia is going to be more supportive as well. So Gabriella, that's a great question, because one of the things that happens is there's a lot of tightness through the hamstrings, right? And that's in the superficial back line as well. So if we strengthen the posterior muscles, maybe if we do some hip hinging to release some of the tightness, because remember, the fascia is covering the muscles, right? So whatever happens to the muscle, the fascia is going to get affected as well. But maybe there's ways that we can get in there, and manual therapists know this, to release fascia without doing exercise. Maybe, I don't know, some kind of stretching, obviously stretching, yeah. Or some kind of rolling out. I have a client and he regularly lays on his ProSoft roller to release that front line, to release the tightness through the chest and get him away from this. Okay.
I usually do that with a very soft ball and support in the head.
Okay.
As to begin a class.
That's
But this, because I always think of fascia more of a stretchy thing. I've never thought of it as a compact strengthening tissue, but now I get it. It does kind of both, because
it does both. It does everything.
It reforms, right?
Yes, it'll remold. So that's the thing about the Wolff's Law and the Davis's Law. The one that we're really thinking of is the Davis's Law, because if you have someone who's really, really tight and you start to stretch them, that's fine. But if you stretch them and strengthen them, you have better odds of getting that tissue to reform to accommodate the new muscle position or the new lengthened muscle or the new whatever. You get what I'm saying, though, I hope.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
So basically, it makes the action of the muscle happen.
It facilitates better movement because it's helping the muscle move better. So perfect example, plantar fasciitis, right? A lot of people complain, oh, my feet hurt so bad. So here's the skin. So let's say this is the surface, the floor. Here's my foot. Here's the bottom of my foot, which is skin, okay? Then right above the skin is the layer of fascia. So technically, the fascial layer in the skin should be able to move past each other like this, right? The fascia should be pliable. However, because people don't really exercise their feet, stretch their feet, wear we're shod like 90% of the time, we wear shoes constantly, these two things get stuck together. So then there's no movement, right? So it's going to limit the movement of the muscles because now it's hard and it's practically fused, right? So it's the same thing throughout our entire body. All right. And then that concludes section 6. And you are at the assessment. Okay. Questions? Comments? And we've got like 5 minutes to spare. Good timing. All right. So let me pull us back into, I'm going to stop the share. And we'll come back to the room. All right. Questions, anybody? What are you thinking?
Well, it's a little bit of a technical question. And the reason I mentioned that I might start a client sitting is because so many, if I were to start them bringing the arms up, immediately, they have troubles bringing the arms up.
Mhm.
So that is why I would start them sitting, finding ways for them to have some axial elongation while sitting. If their arms, I come across that a lot, that they have shoulder problems.
Shoulder
and
issues.
they can't get that axial elongation just standing. So
Can I give
Yeah.
you a suggestion with that? So, two things. The first thing is if you're working with a person with Parkinson's disease, if they are in early stage, they need to be standing for everything right off the bat. The second, and remember, that's the big push. So we need them standing. The second thing is if we're looking for axial elongation, the best axial elongation we can have is in the standing position, right? So seated, it's fine. It's fine what you're doing because yes, indeed, most seniors have all kinds of shoulder issues. But what could possibly work better is if you stand them up, maybe in front of the Cadillac, having them hold the poles or slide their hands up the pole, hold 2, 3, 4, release, sit down, come up, pull themselves up into that position. So that could be one. Another one that I do a lot is I have them stand up to a door and they're about, a nose inch away from the door. Their hands are flat on the door and they're going to slide up one and look for their hand and then come down. And then they slide up trying to get their fingertips to touch the frame of the door and they come down. This is definitely a way to help them get better posture, better opening, more mobility, through the arms and the back. So you're all doing what you're doing is correct. I'm not trying to tell you not to do what you're doing. What I want to do is amplify your thought process and your perspective of what more is possible to help your clients with PD. Okay, so let's just do the takeaway. What do you got as a takeaway from tonight, Jana?
Gosh, I don't know. That postural assessment thing, I gotta start looking at them standing up differently, I think. Right?
It'll help. It'll definitely help. Yeah.
I mean, I do look at them, but I don't do the measurement, So
well, you don't have to be technical about it initially. It just depends on what your goals are. But I always feel like if I see what's going on with their posture, it gives me better information of what I need to do to help them.
For sure.
I don't want to be in a guessing game. I don't want it to be trial or error. I want to target what I see, right? So it could help you. It could help you.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be technical about it. Like I say, you can start to learn how to take a glance at them and see what their clothes look like. And the big key to that is just practicing it, training your eyes to look for stuff. Be the detective, be the postural detective. All right. Paige, what's your takeaway tonight?
And then for me, I mean, so many things. Fascias, that's so interesting. And like I've read things here and there about it. but like learning that it doesn't respond to like the harsh foam rollers and it responds to the soft. I took a melt class for the first time
Yeah.
weeks ago and talking to the teacher about talking all sorts of shop. That was really cool. And like thinking more about how the fascia is going to impact the muscle function and like all of that. But Jana, I don't like write it down and like draw like the technical picture for my postural assessments every time. But a lot of times with my scoliosis clients, I will put my body into that position. Like if their rib cage is twisted one way, I have to feel it. And then like I'll be like, all right, their curve goes this way, and it's a little that way in the pelvis. And then I'll think, all right, I want to bend their spine this way, and I want to reach more there. So I like put myself into it more than
Yeah.
I draw
Yeah.
diagrams.
Yeah, and Jana, you don't have to, the diagrams that I provide are just so you can have an understanding. You don't have to draw that or write that. And then later.
No, I know, but it just makes me looking at that woman,
Yeah.
without her shirt and those lines.
You see a lot of
Just
stuff.
you just see a lot of stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
you could just hold a stick, a dowel rod up, just
Yeah, totally.
to give you some ideas, I think.
Gabriella, takeaway for tonight?
Yeah, as I said, I'm not, the postural assessment is always great. I mean, it's very hard to get someone to see them without their clothes.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, that was exceptional.
Also the clothes, tell you something, but I kind of will get into it more, but I kind of do it as I go. When they first come in, I kind of immediately, say, oh, yes, I can see your left shoulder is a little dropped, or, I give them little hints. And then again, that sitting posture, if I can see them from behind when I'm doing, I can maybe just from behind, I can get a look at their back. But again, the clothes are very misleading sometimes.
Yeah, good.
Definitely, I love the angle things. I think that's really, really helpful. If one, more of a takeaway, that the angles, what what the actual angles
Will
might
be.
mean, rather than being so meticulous, but what the actual.
So I will also say, which I love, this is one of the new sections on ambulation, gait, and freezing. You're going to see how to see those angles depending on the foot position. So it talks all about the feet, and depending on how the feet are placed on the ground, it goes right up the kinetic chain. It's practically 100% predictable. And so it's going to relate back to what we're covering today, but it's going to be a different perspective.
And I do start with someone standing. Definitely new person. I first look at their feet.
Very good. Very good. Excellent. Tere, you got a takeaway from tonight?
So it's always great, Ceci, to affirm a lot of the stuff. We just had an event this weekend, so we went through a workshop with scoliosis and asymmetry. So it's nice to go and see it again in the same week. It's like, wow, it's a calling for something. So that was nice. I always get, because I'm in a process of this and it's not my first time. So I see that I have a lot to learn. It was nice. And I love the recordings because I go back. Like this week, I saw your recordings 1, 2, and 3 at least, 2 or 3 times. I invest. So it's nice. And I like all the information, how you just carry it out, and it seems, wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, I'm glad you guys are getting, a lot out of it. But when I'm asking about the takeaways, I just want you to know, it's not that I want you to give me kudos. I appreciate it a lot. But I just want to make sure that by the end of our session, there's like an aha moment or several of them that you've had that you now can explore more, or you can now apply new information to when you're working with your clients, whether they have PD or not. You can see that this information can go all over the place. It doesn't necessarily only have to be with a PD client. Yeah. All right, you all, I will see you. Let's just confirm, because remember, next week I cannot meet on Wednesdays. So that session was changed to Monday, the 12th. And that's 4:30 to 6:30. If you can or can't make it, I will do the recording. Okay, so
Okay.
everybody has that. It's the same link.
Okay.
Can you repeat the date?
It's Monday, the 12th from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m.
Okay.
Yeah. And just send me a note if there's any, if you can or can't make it, and I will send you the notes. And what we'll do next week, starting next week, whoever's in, you'll do your exercise set, and we will go through section 5. So we jumped ahead to 6, we're going to go back to 5. Mhm.
And what are the exercise sets? Were you gonna?
Okay, yeah, I'll tell you. So Gabriella has mini set 1, 7, and 2. Paige, you have mini set 3, 4, and 8. And Tere, you have mini set 5, 9, 10, 11, and the cardio boost. And you'll just do them all the way through. You can put them in any order you want. Jana, you're not going to be here. You won't be here for Monday either.
I have something on Monday, but I'm going to see if I can change it. So,
Oh, good. I would love
Okay.
that. So, and if that's the case, why don't you take, 5 and 9, and Teddy will do 10, 11, and the cardio boost.
okay.
Okay, so put 5 and 9 on yours.
Okay.
Okay, great. Ladies,
All right,
I'll
good
see you
night.
next week. Thank you.
Take a
Bye-bye.
good one, guys.
Bye.